So, hello everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all on our platform today. It is indeed a special moment for us. Today is the 25th author interaction in our author interaction series, The Story Behind the Story, that we started in July 2020. And I'm Neeta Aneja, and I'm the founder of Trends International Incorporated, which is the forum for art, cultural, social, and literary experiences. And congratulations, everyone, for the Indian Army Day today. We have with us today Mr. Vinay Kumar Singh, who's an author, columnist, and researcher. He's a regular on TV panels presenting realistic perspective on issues of national security and policy. He also regularly contributes on various aspects of international and internal security in different Indian and foreign publications. Mr. Singh, in fact, has done extensive research in Maoist missionary alliance, illegal cattle trade, terror nexus, coal mafia cartel, and much more. So today we are talking about Bleeding India, which is a book which has been published by Garuda Prakashan, and it has been recently unveiled in Delhi. In fact, the book has some incidents, it has taken some incidents into account, like the activities of Popular Front of India, the issues of Rohinikas, Pathalgiri of Jharkhand, and even blasts in Sri Lanka. Vinayji's debut book analyzes the four groups and Ponzi fraud schemes, besides the issue of illegal infiltration. This, in fact, is an excellent book and very, very well researched. It's an eye opener on how the enemies of India are just not external, but are very much present within and continue to trumpet their agenda. I must say, a wonderful book authored by a thought leader and nation loving commentator. So, welcome, Vinayji, to our forum. It's such a privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you, Neetaji, and good evening to all our friends, those who have joined in the meeting today. And a great, congratulations to our Army Jawans and the officials also for the Indian Army Day today. And thanks a lot to you. It's a day of celebration, I think. It's a silver jubilee. It is the 25th author programs of the Trend platform. And within a very short span of time, you have done wonders. And wish you and your team tons of good luck. Thank you, Neetaji.
Thank you. So, Vinayji, we'll immediately get into the conversation. And first of all, I would really, really like to ask you, what drove you to write such a heavy duty book? You know, it's a very heavy topic. Not many people will touch this topic. And this is your first literary milestone. So, what made you write such a heavy duty book? And please also do tell our viewers as to why we should really read the book.
Look, there is a myth, I think, about the issue of internal security that it is a heavy duty issue. I think it is very easy. Even class 5, 6 student, he can, easily understand the issue of internal security if you put it in a very simple way. And there has been limitations also with the issue of internal security. When you talk about internal security, it is just limited to Kashmir or Naxalism or a bit of the northeast problems. But this is not at all. This is not all about internal security. Internal security is more than that. And you can see the footprints, what I call conspiracies against India, in your villages, in small bazars, in the small towns. So this book is basically, a crash course, you can say. So if a person go through, or a student, if you go through this book, so he can develop an ability to magnify the footprints of the conspirators, those who are conspiring against India. And look, when we look at some of the incidents of the recent past, which has touched the national limelight in media or the international limelight, the issues like Bhima Koregaon, CA violence, Bangalore riots, Pathalgadi, the ongoing farmer agitation, or even a few months before there was that Dalit girl rape case in Hathras, we always discuss about the third party agenda, and at many times the Indian agencies, they have come out in their investigation, yeah, there is a third party plot. So again, the farmer agitation is going on, and people are talking in the television channels. You may be seeing debates on there is a third party intervention or there is a conspiracy theory. So what is this conspiracy theory? who are the conspirators? How do they conspire? Do you have any references to those conspiracies, or these conspiracies has been written somewhere? So this book is all about that. It decodes the the conspiracy theory in a very simple and in a very a plain manner. It is a try to make a issue which is thought to be a very complex issue or a very tough issue, but these books will break that myth that internal security is an issue which is connected to our daily life. And even a class primary student, if you can put these issues in a proper way, he can grasp the things, and he can be able to understand this issue. Neetaji.
Yes, totally. You're absolutely right. It's quite a simple read, and definitely. And as I had read somewhere, that it should really be made compulsory for a lot of people, maybe in schools, colleges, so that they can really come to know what national security is all about and the issues that you have touched. But one of the questions I'm sure, and in fact, a lot of people would have asked you, it's a very, very repeated question, but I would like to ask you once again that what really made you reach the conclusion that four aggressors in your book are hurting India?
uh, mm, when we talk about the conspiracy, so there is always a question that who is the conspirator. So actually, I was writing a book on Popular Front of India, and 3 years back, I live in Dhanbad. So in Jharkhand, in just 3 or 4 districts, the PFI was very active. That was the districts close to the eastern corridors. So that was Rajmahal, Jamtara, Godda, Pakur. So what happened that I compiled a report on that, and Raghubar Das was the chief minister in Jharkhand. I sent that, I presented that report to him, and within a month time, I was surprised also that it was very quick. So the PFI got banned, and that was my report on which the PFI got banned. And till today, Jharkhand is the only state where the PFI is banned, and not the only state; it is the last state. No other states are have banned it till date. So I have planned to write a book, a full-fledged book on PFI, because the modus operandi of the PFI, it attracted me. It impressed me also. Impressed is a very positive word, but I am using this positive word for those because their modus operandi is very scientific. So they are basically not supporting terror outfits. They are basically terror outfits. They are manufacturing terrorists. They are factory of terrorists. But if a PFI person, if you interview him or if he meets you, he will have such an impression on you. He will show you nearly 1,000 programs and 1,000 initiatives, School Chalo Abhiyan, and poor girls education program. And so you will feel that, oh, they are such kind of moderate Muslim organizations. So that is their face. That is just a sugar coating. But if you go into the different layers, into the lower, if you try to penetrate inside that, you will find that it is basically a terrorist organization, those who are manufacturing terrorists. But their modus operandi makes the Indian agencies or the Indian police tough to control them, or to map them. So it is difficult for them. For example, nearly more than 100 PFI activists, they have joined ISIS. So if the police personnel, they are asking, or if they are investigating the case, the PFI will say, oh, they are not our members. So the police people or the agencies will say, look, these are the guys, those who have participated into your this event. They will say, oh, they must have been attached to us long time ago, but now they are not. They have gone on their own will, and they have joined ISIS in Syria and whatsoever place. So till today, there is not just PFI. There are many organizations, those who are operating on the same style. Like in Pakistan, if you see, Jamaatul Dawa is there. So Jamatul Dawa, Hafiz Saeed is the leader. So Jamatul Dawa, his style is also same. They work on education, they work on issues of poor, issues of minority, this that. But basically, what they are doing, they are a factory of terrorism. You can say that ISIS, that is graduation of no ISIS, PFI is graduation of terror, and ISIS is a postgraduate or a MBA course. Again, not only one organization. So when I started investigating the PFI thing, and in Jharkhand one more not very famous, but it was a very important agitation. It was called Pathalgadi.
Yes.
So what happened in Pathalgadi? So again, there was referendum 2020, Anandpur Sahib referendum 2020, which was also known as Khalistan referendum 2020. There was a blast in Sri Lanka, which was called Easter attacks. The Rohingya issues were there, and the urban perspective document of the Maoist, which was published in 2004, and the updated version of that came by name UPUA in 2007. So slowly, when I start looking into the other events or the other incidents, those who were able to gain the national or international limelight, it was a surprise for me also that there was a pattern in that. But the issue of Pathalgadi in Jharkhand, the issue of PFI, and the issue of Bhima Koregaon, there was a pattern. And there was a set of organizations, and there was a set of persons, same persons, similar modus operandi, and the same persons, those who were involved in all the activities, not just the activities in India. Even the Easter attack, which happened in Sri Lanka, which killed around 400 Christians in Sri Lanka, that also had got Indian roots. And again, the same set of organizations, the same set of people. So it was a matter of surprise for me also. As a researcher, I was surprised that these issues, they seems to be different. But there is a pattern. So ultimately, what I concluded, that there were four elements or four pillars, those who were involved into that. So I call them quadriga. Quadriga is a chariot drawn by four horses. So exactly the functioning of these organizations was like that chariot. Means chariot means agenda, and the four horses are these four organizations, or these four pillars driving an agenda in a coordination. These four elements were Christian missionaries, communist, radical Islamist, and the fourth was a set of or a group of, or a gang of, band of people comprising people from media, academia, legal professional, cultural activist, and human rights organization. And very similar, not similar, it was same at most of the time. So in all these cases, in Jharkhand's Pathalgadi and in Bhima Koregaon, again, their modus operandi was very simple, and it is in just one word, one line. In all these events, they tried to strengthen the fault line of the Indian society. You know what the fault line is? The fault line is the caste divide, the religion divide. What we call diversity, they call division. What we portray as diversity, what we try to express as diversity, they want to portray as division, differences. So in all these cases, they try to maintain this thing, that the fault line in the Indian society, that is strengthened, and where the fault line is non-existent, they must create a new fault line in that. For example, I am telling you, the very recent case was Hathras Dalit girl rape case. So generally what the people will debate, they will debate there was a rape, or the others will debate no, there was not rape. So according to my investigation, this is not a case of rape or not rape. Suppose there was a rape, that rape happened, but what happened after that, that was a wonderful recipe for the conspirators, that the girl is Dalit and the rapist, they are from the upper caste. So this is the wonderful, this is the recipe what they wanted. So, and this case, they tried to blow out of proportion. So what happens when they blow this case out of proportion? One, they want to make a generalization that look, this is India, and in whole of India, this is happening, that the upper caste people, they are raping the lower caste people. So the international image of India, that gets dented. And on at the bottom, what happens if this case is blown out of proportion, that the divide between the lower caste and the upper caste, even in Kerala, due to the Hathras case, that message is penetrated to the bottom, that look, in India these things are happening. And again, when the police started investigating, this is not a theory what I'm talking about. When the police started investigating, they found the role of PFI, they found the role of Amnesty International. But such a small case, a small town case, but that was blown in such a proportion. And again, if some people they are arguing that look, there is no rape, again, that argument serves the third party agenda. So this is again, it is on a very small scale, but if you see in the Bhima Koregaon case, the Bhima Koregaon case, again, at first hand, if you see that it is a case of caste violence. The Mahars, they wanted to celebrate their pride, their victory over the in the British regime, over the Peshwas. And so it was at the first hand, it was like a, a Dalit versus upper caste class. But when the Pune police started investigating the case, what came out? What came out was surprising. There was an attempt to assassinate the Prime Minister of India.
Imagine.
So at first instance, it seems though it is a rape case and the media is debating, and it is. But when you investigate into that, you get the PFI is involved. The Amnesty International is funding that. And there are certain media groups or the certain platforms, which I call this fourth pillar, they are trying to blow that issue. So that serves this agenda. Again, I was talking about the Bhima Koregaon case. What came out was the Prime Minister assassination plot. And a very favorite, issue of discussion, it nearly is discussed in once or twice in every 2 years, is the befitting debate. So again, befitting is an issue. So Neetaji, if I ask a Hindu sentiment guy that what is your reaction on the befitting? So he will say that Gau Mata and holy cow, so beef eating should be banned. And what the moderate perception is, what they try to establish, that it is a debate of right to eat. But what I see in my research, in my investigation, that it is neither a debate of Gau Mata nor a debate of right to eat or not to eat. And again, I am no one to make a prescription that you as a person should eat beef or not. I am no one in that. I am making a simple observation that this beef eating debate is part of an international conspiracy. It is part of the conspiracy theory. Let me explain it in a very simple way. 30 years back, there was a person whom I have referred in my book. His name was V.T. Rajsekhar Shetty. So Shettis are bunts. Bunts means they are like Kshatriyas, they are upper caste. But Rajsekhar Shetty, he portrayed himself as a champion of Dalit rights. He was publishing a magazine, Dalit Voice. So very less, of that literature is left. But I have got some of his books. It was tough to find his books, but I have his books, full collection of his books. So V.T. Rajsekhar Shetty himself mentions in his book that 30 years back, he has written a Dalit Agenda of 1991 Mumbai Simi Conference. In that he mentions that he met Bhindranwale. Look, it is very interesting that V.T. Rajsekhar Shetty, who champion of Dalit rights, he met Bhindranwale. And he suggested to Bhindranwale that Bhindranwale should appeal to his Sikh followers to eat beef, because beef eating is the only way to defeat Brahminism. However, Bhindranwale rejected his offer, and Rajasekhar Shetty was very unhappy about that. What I want to make a point, that when you start this issue of beef eating, a stir is created, a debate is created. Again, the fault lines of the nation society, the Indian society, that is strengthened between the beef eaters and the non-eaters. That is again not a debate of, and if something happens like lynching or somewhere else, it again serves the purpose of the third party agenda unknowingly. So the third party, those who are raising this issue, they are not serious about you eat or not eat. But the thing is, they want that a division should be created. And if a lynching thing happen, they again try to generalize this thing. Oh, look, the Muslims in this country, they are very insecure. They are very unsafe. Again, a fourth example I am giving you. Very recently, this guy, Sharjeel Imam, he said that he will mobilize, 5,000 people or 25,000 people on the chicken neck, and he will choke that area, and he will separate the northeast from the rest of India. Later on, many things happened, but what have remained unnoticed, that the same lot which creates this propaganda, they come with a logic in defense of Sharjeel Imam. Oh, look, he's an idiot. The same lot, those who have a stand on beef eating, on all these issues, on Bhima Koregaon, the same lot, the same organizations, they come up with the logic, oh, Sharjeel Imam is an idiot, because they wanted to downplay the issue. I made a point in my research that there was an Operation Pin Code. There was an Operation Tupac, which was followed by Operation Pin Code of ISI. So the Operation Tupac was 2K policy, Khalistan and Kashmir. But it was basically a 3K policy. The Operation Pin Code, that refers to the Kishanganj operation. So Khalistan, Kishanganj and Kashmir. So in that third K, it is an idea of the ISI, which has got mentioned in so many books and so many platforms, and the same recipe is given to choke the chicken neck and to cut it from the rest of India. And that is what Sharjeel Imam said. And when this lot saw that he's going to be exposed, they start saying, oh, he's an idiot. They tried to reject, that thing. Again, a very small comment, but important, of this Saif Ali Khan. What he said, India is not a country. You must remember, Nidaji. He said, because his role was chopped up in that Tanhaji movie by Ajay Devgan. So in that frustration, he came out with the logic, India is not a country. So again, what he says, so you may feel that, oh, he is an idiot again, because, the film people, they are not, that IQ they don't have. But what I see, that again, this is a part of the conspiracy theory, what he was talking about. I'm not saying that he is a conspirator, but what he said, that echoed on the same lines with the UPA document of the CPI Maoists, and with what VT Rajasekhar Shetty has written. He also describes India in the same way of Saif Ali Khan, that India is a broken piece of mirror. And the broken pieces, they cannot come together. So these are the footprints, what people say and what they exactly mean. And we can put it in a very, very, simple manner. It is not tough. Neetaji.
I understand your point, but when we are also talking about social media and we're talking about the way the news travels and with so much of polarization in the news channels and the news, I don't know what can be the real source of news coming to us. So both sides of the coin, if we see that social media has its pitfalls, they're trying to convey news, but then what do you do about it? There is no other way out. How do you think that real news can travel to us in that way?
Neetaji, again, let me refer to that Pathalgadi case.
Mhm.
You need to connect the dots. What happened in Pathalgadi, that prime minister assassination plot that came out in the investigation, and the people, those who were named in that plot was Rona Wilson, Sudha Bhardwaj, Gautam Naulakha and all. So I was working in Jharkhand. So I got a report from the MHA, and that report I have mentioned, I have in fact printed in my book. So that report mentions that this Rona Wilson, who is the prime accused of the Prime Minister assassination conspiracy, was trying to lobby for PFI. So the ban on PFI can be revoked. So again, see what a case it is. Rona Wilson, the a person trying to assassinate the Prime Minister of India, he is connected to the most moderate organizations of Muslims, Popular Front of India. And again, there were two persons involved. One was named Basanta Kumari and Anjani Kumar Mal. Both were runs an organization for release of GN Sai Baba and human rights organization. These two guys, they tried to liaison between the CPI Maoist and the PFI. A person connected to the Prime Minister assassination plot, he is connected to PFI. And again, PFI is connected to CPI Maoist. So this is a whole, web of, this is a nexus. And this is not a single organization driving it. It is a common minimum program of the Christian missionaries, communists, and the radical Islamists. One Christian missionary, Father Sten Swami, was also arrested. You must have known about in connection with the Pune investigation. I call it a little Joe format. So little Joe is a cardinal number, which means 3 plus 1. So 3 is these missionaries, communists, radical Islamists, and again the fourth group, which sets a narrative, is this set of intellectual, academia, legal professionals, cultural activists, and all. And everywhere, when I say that there is a bleeding India force, and again my book name is derived from that conspiracy in the Operation Tupac, which was a ISI plot. So in that Operation Tupac, they has a dream to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. That is, written at many places. So bleed India, that idea with 1,000 cuts. From there, we have derived the name of our book, Bleeding India, Four Aggressors. And these are the four aggressors. And what they want to give 1,000 cuts on India. And what is their modus operandi? So use the fault line or create a fault line or strengthen the fault line wherever you get chance. Either it is in the Bhima Koregaon, or it is in the Pathalgadi of Jharkhand, or it is in the Dalit Hathras, that Dalit girl rape case, or it is in Rohit Bemula case. Let me explain you the Pathalgadi incidents, Netaji. It was very interesting. The tribals of Jharkhand, they has a very rich tradition called Pathalgadi. They put a stone play on the memory of their fathers, or their their grandfathers, great grandfathers, or to put a boundary of their land and these things. They want to give a message, so they put a Pathalgadi. So it was a very rich tradition. And that tradition was twisted by this quadriga in such a way that it became an anti-India agitation, and which ultimately manifested itself in a demand of a nation, a separate nation for the tribals.
Oh my God.
So ultimately, in the Pathalgadi, what happened at last was that they rejected the central government. They said that we are going to create our own currency, we are going to create our own medical facility and our own army, and this government is illegal. This was not the actual Pathalgadi. The actual Pathalgadi was very, pro nation. It was not an anti-national something like that. But these forces, they twisted it in such a way that it became a demand for a separate nation. Again, they have done the same thing in the farmers' right. You may be hearing voices that there is a conspiracy, there is a conspiracy. You just analyze it in a very simple way. There is a farm protest. Why that is? Because some of farmer unions, they are opposed to set of laws. What is the solution? A dialogue between the government and the farmers union. A dialogue on what? The farm laws. But you see that the farmer agitation has been used as a platform for many issues which are out of syllabus for a farmer agitation. Release the urban Naxals. You can hear the echo of that Khalistan referendum. And why you are hearing that echo? Because again, there is a third party agenda, means there is a third party intervention. I am referring to the Khalistan referendum that is known as Anandpur Sahib referendum 2020. That is named 2020 because there was something to be done in 2020. But what happened? You have a strong government in center. You are not able to do much. So what they did, they pushed this agenda from 7 separate countries, from Russia, from Pakistan, from Germany, Italy, Canada, America, and London. So if you go through the premier websites and the premier publications of these countries, you will find several articles which gives you the full conspiracy theory that what they want in Khalistan. 2 writers I am quoting. One is Andrei Kropko. He is a half Russian, half American. One is Tahir Khan. Tahir is a Pakistani. They write on republica.ru and many platforms across the world. So what Andrew and Tahir writes, you will be surprised because they cannot write this in India. They will be lodged with charges of sedition. So they pushed this idea of the Khalistan referendum from outside, from the foreign soils. So you will be able to understand why the Canadian Prime Minister, he intervenes into the farmers' agitation.
Absolutely.
Because there is a lobby, there is a pressure group which has pressurized him to intervene in this farmer agitation because the agenda is up. Again, in London, there were several protests from Khalistanis on the India House. Who are the protesters? 6 in turbans. Who is leading them? A Pakistani. His name is Lord Nazir Ahmad. Who is this Lord Nazir Ahmad? So he has a unique view on Malala Yousafzai shooting. He says that no, the terrorists shoot them because that was a case of mistaken identity. And he praised Osama bin Laden. So that person is leading the Khalistan referendum in London. So there is a set, there is a pattern, there is a group, there is a conspiracy, there is a calendar for that. But they were not able to do much because there is a strong government in center. So farmer agitation was a chance for those conspirators to do something. Again, what I want to make a point that look, if you say that look, the people protesting, they are not farmers, they are Khalistanis. If you reject them by saying Khalistani, the third party agenda is served. If you accept their demands, the third party agenda is served. If you put force on them, the third party agenda is served. You are a strong government, but a small agitation of 5,000 or 10,000 people, they have put the government on back foot. One more last story I will tell you, which was one of the reasons of writing this book. That when we talk about ethnic cleansing, so everybody will talk about the Kashmiri Pandits. If you come to Jharkhand, people will say ethnic cleansing means Kashmiri Pandits. But the people of Jharkhand, they don't know that there are certain places in Jharkhand and there are certain places across India where ethnic cleansing has been done. I have quoted an example. There is a Udhwa block in Rajmahal district of Jharkhand. In that particular block, within a 30-year span of time, three castes were targeted: Chai Mandal, Gangota, and Bind. And they were pushed out of that block. And that case has not been mentioned anywhere yet. And these three castes were targeted and driven out of that block. Not a single family of these three castes, they are living there, which were really in majority before 30 years. So, you need to get a solution. But before that, Neetaji, we need to diagnose the problem. The problem is in different formats. That is in different forms. When you give a visit to the eastern corridors of this country, which Sharjeel Imam was referring to, there is more than 2,000 kilometers of stretch, which is more vulnerable, 100 times more vulnerable than Kashmir. It is 100 times more vulnerable than Kashmir. But we need to diagnose these issues first, and we definitely need to come out of a solution. My book is a diagnosis of the disease in a
Very
very
well.
simple way.
Absolutely. And there are so many case studies that you're talking about and that they're there in the book. I suppose it's going to really, really benefit a lot of people who really want to really know the nerve of India, want to find out, as you just mentioned, that diagnosis of the problem. And I think you're also writing a second book, which will
Yeah.
be kind of a sequel, or how is it going to
No,
be?
that is not a sequel. That is basically based on Rani Singidai. She
Okay.
was a Uram tribal queen.
Hmm.
So she was a queen of the Rohtas fort.
Hmm.
It is in Bihar. So she is a symbol of valor and bravery. She is unparalleled. So we need to. It is going to be a novel kind of thing, but her story is very impressive. But very less, is written about her. In fact, nothing is written about her. So she fought the Afghans, Sher Shah Suri,
Okay.
and ultimately they were defeated. The Urans were defeated, and they were chased out of Rohtas, and they settled in different parts of Jharkhand, the present Jharkhand. But that is a wonderful story, and it's a very inspiring story.
I'm sure. And you're so fond of researching, like even in this book, Bleeding India, you've done so much of research and come out with such solid facts. So, did it take you a lot of time to research for the book and then write the book? So, what was the process like? How many days or how many months you spent on researching for Bleeding India and then writing it and then coming
Neetaji,
out with such a
three years
magnificent.
back, I had a very bad accident. I don't know it was a bad accident or a good accident, but it was a very narrow escape. I was able to witness death from a very closely. I was able to witness that. However, I am here, still alive. But I thought that this life, is a bonus, and something you should make a proper use of that. So that was the exact time when I was researching on PFI. So I think it was a divine, instruction that you must continue with this job. So that is what I did. It is all because of that accident, and the things changed.
Because it's definitely going to really benefit a lot of people because it's such an extensive and vast topic that you've really touched. And I'm sure it must have been a very time consuming process for you writing so much in detail. So how much time did you take to write the book?
It was almost 3 years, and then the publishers, they are very tough with the authors, because they decide and they take time to decide that it is uh, good to be published, it is worth publishing or not. So
Hmm.
they had internal reviews with so many persons, from ex raw people, ex IB people, and when they got their feedback, so then they decided that, okay, we are going with your book, we are going to print it. So that took almost 8 9 months, and the research part was of almost 2.5 to 3 years. So it was almost 4 years, 3.4 to 5 to 4 years. It was a job.
In fact, Bleeding India is your first book. So if you had to rewrite the book, some of the parts, do you think you will make some changes, or you feel that you've done full justice to this topic?
I don't know, that the reader can decide, but what I have tried to do is that this myth should break, And what the reason behind this, Nitaji? I think that, for the last 100 years, for the last so many years, when till when this kind of politics has emerged, even mostly after the uh, post-independence period. So what were the major issues? Bijli, sadak, pani, shiksha, swasth.
Hmm.
I think in the coming 10 years, these issues are going to vanish. These issues will be no more. These issues are going to die because they are going to be addressed by the government, whosoever the government is.
All right.
It is going to be addressed properly. So what will be the issues? The issues will exactly be same to those countries where these issues are not there. Bijli, sadak, pani, shiksha, and swasth are not the issues. So I think internal security is going to be a subject of interest for the electorates also, and for the leaders also. Leaders, not just political leaders, but leaders across the all spheres, bureaucracy, administration, politics. So you need to understand these issues, because these issues are going to be the main issues of the coming time in politics. So India is going to change its orbit. India is trying to change its orbit from a developing country to a developed country. So in this process, these issues will be addressed, and these issues will vanish. And the issues of internal security, the electorates will also analyze that which political party has what stand on the issues of interest, of the of national interest. So it is a matter of upgrading even the electorates and the leaders also.
Very well said, and it's quite a futuristic book, I must say. And you're so right that in the coming time, the basic issues will be solved, and they are being solved, and then we'll come to the main issues that you're talking about. And I think it is the right book at the right time. In fact, this is the book that we've been talking about, Bleeding India. This has been published by Garuda Prakashan.
I
It's a
do have.
wonderful book, so we should all read it, and we should all try to find out more about it. Uh, Vinayji, I'll come to the interactive round now, because we have, in fact, three winners of a little contest that we had done for the book. It was kind of a giveaway contest, but it was conducted in the collaboration with the publishers, Garuda Prakashan. And the winners that we selected, it was difficult to select them, but there were three winners. And in fact, they're going to get your wonderful book. And they've been shortlisted on the basis of the question they had put to us. And we have three winners, Atharva, Jayavardhan, and Akshat. They are here with us. So I'd like to go over to them straight, and let us begin the interactive round, which is in fact a very, very popular segment in our all the platforms, all the interactions that we do. First, we have Atharva. He is in fact from Mumbai. He's doing his undergraduation from IIT in IIT Jodhpur in mechanical engineering, and he is really interested in the topics related to national security and diplomacy. In fact, he had said that, from the title of the book, it was evident, and it is evident, that it will discuss about the impending dangers within the country in accordance with the Pakistan's policy of bleeding India with 100 cuts. So this is what he thought, what the book would mean, and when he reads it, he'll have more perspective. So I'd like to unmute. Yeah. Hello, Atharva. Thank you for joining, and thank you for winning the book. Your question, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for that introduction. So my question was, sir, with the world entering in the era of fourth generational warfare, and several countries that they are resorting to hybrid warfare tactics, so what should be the role of citizens to counter such operations and narratives? Because I believe that it requires active public participation?
A very good question, Atharva, and congrats, you have you are the winner today. So, example I am giving you, Atharva, the CA protest was going on,
Yes, sir.
and the CA protest, you can see a pattern that in every districts or even in Delhi also, some Dalit organizations, they were supporting this agitation. So let us take it this way. If this CA, the CA is against the Muslims of this country, suppose for a while, what do the Dalits have to do with that? Why are the Dalit Chandrasekhar Azad is coming in support of that? And it was not just Chandrasekhar Azad in Delhi. I saw in Dhanbad, a Wasepur place on which the movie is done. There was a tent on which where the protest was going on. So there was some Ambedkar Samiti and that CA Birodh Sanstha and all. I went to Sasaram. Again, I saw that there was a Dalit organization supporting that. I saw in Banaras. So what I did, I just connected to my friends elsewhere. And I told them that you see that. They said that yes, everywhere it is there. So what does this mean? My book is exactly decoding this thing which you can just walk away without noticing. But this is basically a footprint of that conspiracy. And again, what the conspiracy is, let me put it in a very simple way. The person whom I was referring to, V.T. Rajsekhar Shetty, he has said in his Dalit agenda, he has written a Dalit agenda for 1991 Mumbai CIMI conference. So in that CIMI conference, he has given a recipe. What that recipe is, that all the minorities, Dalit, Sikhs, Muslims, they must come together, and they must not come together for social harmony. They must come together to oppose that 15%. This comprise 85%, and they must oppose to that 15%. And what the interesting thing is that the leadership quality among these 95% is only with the Muslims, because the Muslims can answer that 15% in every way, violently, non-violently, or in the Ahmad Shah Abdali style. He's written Ahmad Shah Abdali style. So he wanted that this 85% should come together, and the Muslims, the leadership should be with Muslims, and he make an appeal to the Muslims that this 85% is blood brothers. So again, this Muslim and Dalit, this alliance, this is exactly not for social harmony. What you can see in the farmer protest, the Muslim and Sikh harmony, that is not social harmony, my friend. What I want to say, that you have ample references. The report I have quoted, that urban perspective document, it was basically a CPI Maoist document prepared by Kobad Gandhi. The first edition was in 2004, and the updated version came in 2007. In that, they have mentioned to infiltrate into the student organization, into the farmer organization, and even into the Mohalla committees, the RWS. They have written to infiltrate into the Puja organization. If you are having a Durga Puja Samiti, so they have mentioned, they have prescribed that in the reconsolidation of Naxalism, you should penetrate into these very organizations. And what you see, that is not harmony. So what I want to say, that as a simple citizen, when you are crossing a protest and you see something like the Dalits and the Muslims, so, and the Dalits has no issue with that protest. So again, that is an idea, and it is a general, everywhere this kind of protest is going on, this kind of support is going on. So this is again designed by whom? The conspirators. And what is the footprint? This is the footprint. that a Dalit organization which has nothing to do with this act, they are in support of that. And again, the fourth pillar, the fourth party, whom I call as a set of academia, intellectuals, cultural activists, including the film people of films and human rights organizations, they come in support of that. Oh, look, the Dalit organizations, they are, in supporting this. The Sikh organizations, they are running langars for the Rohingyas. The Sikh organization, they are running langars for Rohingyas. The Muslims, they are running langars for the Sikh protesters, the farmer protest. But what I am saying, that this is not social harmony. If that was for social harmony, we would have welcomed that. But this is a strategy, and this strategy has got references in the V.T. Rajsekhar's writing, references in UPA document, references what is being written about the Khalistan referendum across these countries in Russia, America, England, Germany, everywhere. But very simply you can understand this thing. So this is the way of understanding. A very, very complex issue can be understood in a very simple way. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Athar, for joining in. Now we have Jayavardhan Dedish. He's a student of geography. He's a Indian classical vocalist, a very, very, very talented guy. He's working with Padma Vibhushan Birju Maharajji as lead vocalist, and he has great interest in politics and international relations.
Namaskar, sir. A very good evening. It's
Thank you,
good to
Jayavardhan.
see you.
And congrats.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So my question is, sir, as Pakistan is constantly trying to infiltrate the territory of Jammu and Kashmir and fomenting an insurgency among the Muslim population in the valley as of Operation Gibraltar in 1965. So how can we tackle the situation with the use of RAW's espionage, as remembering Major Mohit Sharma, his birthday was 2 days back, who was killed in action at Kupwara. So what's the way forward for a research and analysis wing in countering the insurgency with the secret operations, in maintaining just the internal security matter?
What I'm saying, Jayavardhan, that look, internal security is just not limited now to the borders. It is now in the streets. So there is a role of RAW, there is a role of IB, and they are doing wonders. They are the unsung heroes. We don't know even what they are doing, and they are not supposed to. We see some films sometimes based on RAW heroes, and we are able to see that what kind of services they are giving. So it is a very coded and a very secret kind of everything. So, but what I want to make a point, that it is not just RAW which is responsible for this issue. It is we, the people living in the small villages, living in the kasbahs, living in the small towns. We need to map the footprints of these conspiracy theories. We need to, if we could make a report. There are several platforms, you should mail it. I have done that. I prepared a report on PFI. That was the process of, getting that thing into a book. I never intended to write a book. It was not in my plan. I started with a report on PFI. And that also started with a news article reported in some 10th page of the local newspaper, that the PFI activists, they are marrying local tribal girls and they are not converting them to Islam, because by not converting them, they are having the tribal status and they are contesting the Mukhya elections, Panchayat elections, they are buying lands and all. So, there is a pattern, there is a strategy, there is a theory in that. When I started digging into that, I was able to, get a galaxy of this. I went into that galaxy of this PFI. So, it is the responsibility, I think, of the common mass, of the general people, of students like you. I am also a student of, internal security. So for a person like me, that we should understand or try to understand if we think there is something which need to be known to others also, we must write it in the social media. If you can send it to someone you know in the police department, or you, all the emails and everything is available in the public domain now of all the organizations. You can mail them to the NIA, to the IB, and to everyone. So it must be decentralized. If you want to counter the fourth generation warfare strategy, so this is the counter, that it should be countered in a decentralized manner, not in a centralized manner with some Indian agencies. This is what I want to say. Or we are yet to evolve that. we can evolve that mechanism. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay, for a wonderful question. Now we have Akshat. In fact, he's been really wanting to read your book, and he says that why he wants to read your book is because he feels that the ongoing global jihad against the Bharat Bhumi by intellectuals, international media, communists, liberalists, all the other forces giving cuts to India. And I want to find, he says that he wants to find that out from your book. So here we have Akshat. He is in fact doing his civil engineering from SGGS Nanda. He's joined us all the way from Nanda, right? Akshat, please carry on.
Thanks, Akshat, and congrats.
Namaste, Binay sir, and thank you, Trends, for giving me this opportunity. My question is that in Northeast, the Quadriga are managed to almost cut the northeast part from the India, and they are just doing the same thing in Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and in there are 500 Kashmirs in India on their just like 500 Kashmir like situation in India. So are they working on Gangadhar Adhikari thesis to complete the Gangadhar Adhikari's dream? That Gangadhar Adhikari's thesis states that India is India is not a country. India is a part of broken glass. It was in 1944. So are they working on Gangadhar Adhikari thesis?
Akshat, this broken glass thing, that is a very, when we say that we are one civilization, they come with a counter narrative. No, you are not a civilization. You are not a nation also. You are a broken glass. And broken glass has the character that it cannot be put together. If you see in a broken glass, you will see 100 of different kind of faces, different faces, your faces from different angles. So this is what Sergil also said, and what I just referred to Saif Ali Khan also said, that no, India is not a country. But Akshat, our main strength is diversity and pluralism. This is what the idea of India is. I have started this book with that only. I am not opposed to any religion, to Islam or Christianity, but what I think, there is a challenge in front of these religions also, that the beauty of Islam and Christianity is not able to come out at the forefront because of their own agencies involved into proselytization, into dharmantar. So if they are getting a bad name across the world, so their agencies are responsible. Their proselytization agencies are responsible for that. But again, monotheism is a threat to the world order, not just for India. They want one God, but what the repercussions of that one God will be, that they want to divide India. They want to bleed India. And what we call as diversity, they call as differences. So this is where the fault lines lies. And again, the third decade, which was less discussed, the Kashmir and Khalistan was discussed a lot, but Kishanganj was never discussed. So that was the third phase. Operation Gibraltar was there, then Operation Topak was there, then Operation Pin Code was there. So the third K, it is more vulnerable. It is 100 times more dangerous than Kashmir. Because not just Kishanganj, when they say Kishanganj, it is almost more than 2,000 kilometers of the border area where they have changed the demography in the last 30-40 years, where they have chased out, they have ethnically cleansed out the indigenous population, the indigenous caste over there. And what I say it in that book, it is a jihad corridor. Jihad corridor is a concept like a red corridor of the Naxals. So Jihad corridor is an unbroken chain of around 2000 to 2500 kilometers. And the idea of Jihad corridor is to have maximum mobilization in the minimum notice period. For example, if 100 stone pelters, they gathers in Kashmir, sometimes the army has to get on back foot. Suppose if that number multiplies into 5 lakhs, and they are not just armed with stones, they are armed with more lethal weapons. This is the idea of Jihad corridor, and they have developed that corridor, and that is what the third K was, and that is more vulnerable, which has remained unnoticed. Or we can say that Kashmir issue was used as a cover fire to hide the issues of the Eastern Corridor. And this situation is pathetic. The situation is horrible. You won't feel that the way the people live there, the way people practice there, you won't feel that it is a part of India. So it is the biggest challenge for that. And you know why that happened? Because in the last few decades, or you can say our post-independence, the Indian political parties, they crossed everything. They crossed the borderline for appeasement, for Muslim appeasement. They crossed the borderline of national interest. The demography of the Eastern corridors has been changed. And I think this is the biggest threat. And this is if you rate the threats in India, I think that will be rated as #1 threat. And that gives, a wonderful breeding ground for their agenda, for for their plan of action. It needs to be immediately addressed. I think the government is serious about that also. But the situation is very pathetic. Kashmir is not a point of, a problem that much of that intensity. If you rate it, the Eastern Corridor, whom I call it a Jihad corridor, that will be rated as the #1 threat in this country. Yes.
I think Vinayji, you really have very, very deep insight on all the issues because you're so passionate about this issue of national security that we can really come out, we can really make it out. And especially from the book, the kind of research you've done, the way you've written, I think really hats off to you. And it's been really heartening to see you in so many national debates happening, live debates on TV. And today you are there on our platform. And I must say, thank you so much for taking out time for us. So anything else that you would like to, maybe some line of thought that you've missed out and you want to tell people, please, we'd like to have your last word in this conversation.
Thank you, Neetaji. I was overwhelmed. I was able to be a part of your team and best of luck. And what, just Akshat was referring to, your platform is also a part of the counter recipe to this 4th generation warfare technique, which is used by the conspirators of this against this country. So your platform is also serving a purpose. And I think this is the only way. We should come up with different tools and different mechanisms to counter this threat, because this threat is different kind of threat. So thank you all, and God bless all of the team of yours and of the team of Trends. And I wish you today it was a silver jubilee. You quickly complete your golden jubilee.
Thank you.
The Author Interaction Program. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Garuda Prakashan, for connecting us to Vinayji and sponsoring the books for the winners. And I would also request for everyone who's joined in today that you must like, subscribe our channel so that you can see other author interactions like the one that you saw today, which was so heartening and so passionate. And thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.